The Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly had never felt so cold. Representatives from 12 spacefaring species sat in their designated sections, but no one spoke with the usual diplomatic pleasantries. Fear hung in the air like smoke, thick enough to choke on. Elder Counselor of the watched the holographic display at the center of the chamber. It showed 3 planets burning. Colony worlds that had existed for thousands of cycles were now nothing but ash and rubble. The Dominion had struck without warning, and 9 million civilians had died in a single week. There were a species of 6-limbed reptilian predators who had built their empire on conquest and blood. They believed that strength was the only law that mattered. The weak existed to serve the strong, and those who could not serve were eliminated. For centuries, they had stayed within their borders, content to rule their conquered territories. Now they wanted more. Ambassador of the rose from his seat. His body clicked and hummed as he addressed the assembly. "We must face the truth," he said. "The conquered cannot stop our combined fleets are half the size of theirs. Our soldiers are not bred for war as theirs are. If we fight, we will lose. If we surrender, perhaps some of us will survive as servants rather than corpses." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Several representatives nodded in reluctant agreement. They were known for their cold logic, and its assessment was accurate. The Galactic Conquered had maintained peace through trade and diplomacy for 10,000 cycles. They had forgotten how to wage war. Felt something stir in her memory. She was old, even by standards, and she had spent her long life studying the ancient archives. Most of what she had read was dry history, forgotten treaties and dead languages. But some records spoke of things that seemed impossible. She rose slowly, her bioluminescent skin casting a soft blue glow in the dim hall. "There may be another option," she said. Every eye turned toward her. They were respected as keepers of knowledge, but they were not warriors. What could an old archivist offer in a time of war? "In the oldest sections of our archives," continued, "there are records of a species from a remote spiral arm, a species called humans." Made a dismissive clicking sound. "I have heard these stories, fairy tales told to frighten children, creatures that could heal from wounds that would kill any other being, predators that hunted by chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion, warriors who would die for strangers they had never met. These are myths, Elder Counselor, nothing more." "Perhaps," said, "but the records include coordinates. The location of theirs still exists in our archives. It was recorded 40,000 cycles ago by an exploration vessel that observed their planet from a distance. The vessel's crew chose not to make contact. Their reports described the humans as too dangerous to approach." The chamber fell silent. 40,000 cycles was an unimaginable span of time. Most species in the Conquered had not even developed space travel until the last few thousand cycles. If humans had existed that long ago, they should have spread across the galaxy by now. Unless they had destroyed themselves, as violent species often did. "Even if these humans existed once," said Ambassador of the, "they are surely extinct. No species that aggressive could survive for 40,000 cycles." Had considered this argument many times. She did not have an answer for it. All she had was a feeling, a quiet certainty that the records were not fiction. The ancient who had written those reports had been scientists, not storytellers. They had described what they saw without exaggeration or embellishment. "We are facing extinction ourselves," said. "They will not stop at 3 colonies. They will continue until every species that opposes them is dead or enslaved. We have nothing to lose by investigating these coordinates. If we find nothing, we are no worse than before. If we find something, we may yet survive." His compound eyes studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to the assembly. "The elder counselor speaks of desperation, and she is correct that we are desperate. I do not believe in myths, but I believe in exploring every option before accepting defeat. I vote to send a vessel to these coordinates." One by one, the other representatives added their votes. The decision was unanimous, though could see the doubt in their faces. They were not voting because they believed in humans. They were voting because they had no other hope left. Captain of the diplomatic vessel Quiet Seeker received her orders the following day. She was young for a captain, barely 200 cycles old, but she had proven herself capable in difficult situations. Her crew of 30 was chosen for their skills in first contact protocols and their ability to remain calm under pressure. Joined the crew as an advisor. She wanted to see for herself whether the legends were true. If humans existed, She needed to understand them before anyone else in the Concord tried to make contact. The journey took 12 days through faster-than-light corridors. The coordinates led to an unremarkable yellow star in a quiet region of the galaxy, far from any major trade routes or strategic positions. It was the perfect place for a species to hide if they did not want to be found. As the quiet seeker dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, Captain stared at her sensor displays in disbelief. The system was not empty, it was not primitive, it was alive with activity. Massive stations orbited several planets. Ships of unfamiliar design moved along established routes. Communication signals flooded every frequency, carrying voices and data in languages the ship's computers could not translate. "This is impossible," whispered. "They should have expanded across the galaxy by now. They should have made contact with someone. Why did they stay hidden?" Stood beside her, watching the displays with tears forming in her ancient eyes. The myths were real. Humans existed, and they had built something remarkable in their isolation. Before anyone could speak again, the communication panel lit up with an incoming signal. A face appeared on the screen, a face that matched the ancient descriptions exactly. 2 eyes, 1 mouth, skin in shades of brown, hair dark and cut short. The being wore a uniform of some kind, dark blue with symbols on the collar. "Unknown vessel," the human said in flawless galactic common. "This is Commander Lisa of the United Earth Defense Force. Please state your intentions." Found her voice. "We are the Quiet Seeker, a diplomatic vessel of the Galactic Concord. We come seeking aid. Our people are dying, and the ancient records say that humans might help us." Lisa studied them through the screen. Then she smiled, and something about that expression made feel safer than she had felt in months. "We have been watching the galaxy for a long time," Lisa said. "We know about the follow the escort ships to Earth, and we will talk about what comes next." The channel closed. Outside the viewport, 2 human vessels appeared as if from nowhere, sleek and fast and bristling with weapons. They took positions on either side of the Quiet Seeker and began guiding it deeper into the system. Watched the blue and green planet growing larger in the distance. Earth, the of the species that the galaxy had called a myth. She hoped they were ready for what was coming, because after 40,000 cycles of silence, humans were about to take the field. The escort ships guided the Quiet Seeker past wonders that Captain could barely comprehend. A ring of solar collectors surrounded the inner planets, gathering energy on a scale that dwarfed anything the Concord had ever built. Mining stations dotted the asteroid belt, their lights blinking like distant stars. A shipyard near the 4th planet held vessels under construction, their skeletal frames stretching for kilometers. Pressed her hand against the viewport, her bioluminescent skin flickering with amazement. "They have had 40,000 cycles to develop in isolation," she said. "They could have conquered the galaxy 10 times over. Why did they choose to stay hidden?" Stood nearby, his compound eyes taking in every detail. The ambassador had insisted on joining the diplomatic mission despite his skepticism. Now his clicking sounds had grown quieter, his dismissive attitude replaced by something that looked like fear. "A species this advanced that chooses not to expand," said slowly. "That is not the behavior of conquerors. That is the behavior of predators waiting for the right moment to strike." Shook her head. "Or it is the behavior of a species that learned patience. We will find out soon enough." Earth filled the viewport as they approached. Blue oceans and green continents shimmered beneath swirls of white clouds. Cities spread across the landmasses like glittering jewels, connected by networks of light that crisscrossed the night side of the planet. Orbital elevators stretched from the surface to massive stations hanging in geosynchronous orbit. The Quiet Seeker was directed to a landing platform on one of these stations. Commander Lisa met them personally at the airlock, accompanied by a security team that carried no visible weapons. The humans smiled and offered greetings in Galactic Common, their pronunciation perfect. "Welcome to Gateway Station," Lisa said. "Admiral Cole is waiting to meet with you. Please follow me." The walk through the station revealed more surprises. Humans of all sizes and colors moved through the corridors, some in uniforms and others in casual clothing. They laughed and talked and showed no fear of the alien visitors. Children pointed at its glowing skin with excitement rather than terror. One small human ran up to and asked if he was a giant bug, then ran away giggling when his mother called him back. "Your people do not seem alarmed by our presence," observed. Lisa smiled. We have known about alien life for a very long time. We have been preparing for this day. Our people understand that the galaxy is full of different species, and they are curious rather than afraid. They reached a conference room with wide windows overlooking the planet below. A human male sat at the head of the table, his hair gray and his face lined with age. He wore the same dark blue uniform as Lisa, but with more symbols on his chest and collar. His eyes were pale blue, steady and calm as he studied the visitors. "I am Admiral Henry Cole," he said. "I command humanity's defense forces. Please sit and tell me about the situation in the Concord." Took the lead. She described the attacks, the destruction of the 3 colonies, the deaths of 9 million civilians. She explained the military imbalance, the Concord's inability to mount an effective defense, the certainty that more attacks would come. She spoke of the ancient records that had led them to seek out the mythical humans as a last hope. Cole listened without interrupting. His expression remained neutral throughout the presentation, giving no hint of his thoughts. When finished, he asked only one question. How many children were among the dead? The question surprised her. She consulted her data tablet and found the answer. Approximately 2 million of the casualties were juveniles of various species. They do not distinguish between combatants and civilians, adults and children. Something changed in Cole's eyes. It was subtle, a hardening that had not been there before. He glanced at Lisa, and some unspoken communication passed between them. "I need to consult with Earth's governing council," Cole said. "This decision cannot be made by the military alone. Please wait here. You will have food and refreshments brought to you." The humans left the room. The delegation waited in uncertain silence, watching the planet turn slowly below them. Broke the silence first. "They seem soft," he said. "No natural armor, no claws, no venomous stingers. Their bodies are vulnerable compared to most species. I do not understand how they could pose a threat to the ancient records described them as persistent predators," reminded him. "They hunted by pursuing prey over long distances until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. That requires endurance, not armor." "Endurance does not win wars," replied. "Weapons and numbers win wars." Had walked to the window and was looking down at Earth. "Look at what they have built," she said quietly. "Look at this station, those ships, that planet covered in cities. This species has had 40,000 cycles of development. If they were weak, they would not have survived. There is something here we are not seeing yet." Hours passed. Food was brought as promised, dishes that were strange but edible for each species present. The humans who served them were polite and professional, answering basic questions but deflecting anything related to military capabilities. Finally, Cole returned. He stood at the head of the table and looked at each member of the delegation in turn. "Earth has voted," he said. "The decision was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Humanity will help defend the Galactic Concord against the Dominion." Felt relief flood through her body. "Thank you, Admiral. The Concord will be grateful beyond measure." Cole held up his hand. "There are conditions. We will fight alongside your forces, not instead of them. We will follow the rules of war as we define them, which includes the protection of civilians and the humane treatment of prisoners. And when this is over, we expect to negotiate humanity's place in the galactic community as equals, not as servants or weapons to be discarded." "Those terms are more than reasonable," said. "I will recommend that the Assembly accept them without modification." Cole nodded. "Then we should begin immediately. They are preparing to attack the system. If we move quickly, we can reinforce the colony before their fleet arrives." He touched a panel on the table, and a holographic display appeared showing ship deployments and travel routes. Lisa began explaining the tactical situation, but was only half listening. She was watching Cole, studying the human who would lead his species into their first galactic war. There was something in his bearing that she had not seen in the leaders of the Concord. It was not aggression or bloodlust. It was purpose. He was a man who had made a decision and would see it through regardless of the cost. The Concord's leaders had been debating and negotiating, and hoping the problem would solve itself. Cole had listened to the facts, consulted his people, and chosen to act. In the time it took the Assembly to vote on sending a diplomatic mission, humanity had decided to go to war. Moved close to and spoke in a low voice. "I am no longer skeptical of the legends," he admitted. "I am beginning to think they may have been understatements." Watched Lisa and Cole coordinating with officers via communication screens, their movements efficient and confident. Yes, she said, I believe you may be right. 3 days later, the Quiet Seeker departed Earth alongside the first human battle group bound for. The alien delegation had been given quarters aboard the carrier Endurance, where they would observe and report back to the conquered. As the fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed, looked out at the stars, and wondered what they would think when they discovered that the myths were real. She suspected they would not think about it for very long. The carrier Endurance was a city in space. It held over 5,000 human soldiers, hundreds of smaller combat vessels, and enough supplies to sustain operations for months without resupply. The alien delegation had been given quarters near the observation deck, where they could watch the crew go about their duties without interfering with military operations. What they witnessed in those first days of travel changed everything they thought they knew about humans. Found herself drawn to the training areas where soldiers prepared for combat. She expected to see weapons drills and tactical exercises. Instead, she saw something far more unsettling. The humans ran. They ran for hours on machines that simulated endless roads. They ran until their clothing was soaked with sweat and their faces were red with exertion. Then they drank water, rested briefly, and ran again. They lifted heavy objects over and over, building muscle through repetition and strain. They climbed walls and crawled through obstacles and swam in artificial pools. They pushed their bodies to the point of collapse, then pushed further. This is how they trained for war? Asked, his compound eyes tracking a female soldier who had been running for over 2 hours without stopping. Lisa had been assigned to answer the delegation's questions. She smiled at its confusion. We call it physical conditioning. The human body is adaptable. The more we push it, the stronger and more resilient it becomes. A well-conditioned human can operate without sleep for days, continue fighting with injuries that would incapacitate most species, and recover from wounds that should be fatal. That seems like an exaggeration, said. Lisa's smile faded. I have seen a soldier take a piece of shrapnel through his lung. He held his breath, sealed the wound with medical foam, and kept firing until reinforcements arrived. He spent 3 weeks in medical care afterward. He is now back on active duty. Said nothing. His clicking sounds had stopped entirely. The next day observed a sparring session. Human soldiers fought each other with padded weapons and bare hands, practicing techniques for close combat. The violence was controlled but real. Bones broke. Blood flowed. The medical staff treated injuries and sent the wounded back into the rotation within hours. One soldier, a large male with skin the color of dark wood, took an elbow strike to his forearm that produced an audible crack. He grimaced, held still while a medic wrapped the broken bone in a rigid support, and returned to the practice area to train with his uninjured arm. How is that possible? Asked. The pain must be unbearable. Lisa shrugged. Humans have a complicated relationship with pain. We feel it, certainly, but we have learned to function through it when necessary. Our ancestors survived in harsh environments where stopping meant death. That survival instinct is still part of us. Captain joined the conversation. The ancient records described humans as persistent predators. What does that mean exactly? Lisa led them to a quiet area and pulled up historical images on a display screen. The images showed primitive humans, barely clothed, pursuing 4-legged animals across open grasslands. Before we developed technology, Lisa explained, our ancestors hunted by following prey animals for hours or even days. We could not run faster than them, but we could run longer. Most animals overheat quickly when they exert themselves. Humans have efficient cooling systems in our skin. We can keep moving when our prey has to stop and rest. Eventually, the prey collapses from exhaustion, and we catch it. She zoomed in on one of the images, showing a human standing over a fallen animal. This is what we evolved to do. We are not the fastest or the strongest, but we do not give up. We do not stop. We keep coming until the chase is over. Felt a chill run down her spine despite the comfortable temperature of the ship. She thought about who were used to quick victories through overwhelming force. They had never faced an enemy that would simply refuse to die. But the physical capabilities were not the most disturbing thing the delegation witnessed. That came on the 4th day of travel, when Lisa introduced them to the concept of human bonding. She took them to a common area where off-duty soldiers were relaxing. Some played games with cards or dice. Others talked in small groups, laughing and sharing stories. A few sat alone, reading or listening to music through small devices in their ears. These soldiers come from different countries, different cultures, different backgrounds, Lisa said. Some of them met for the first time when they were assigned to this ship, but watch how they interact. Watched, she saw soldiers sharing food from their personal supplies. She saw them offering comfort to those who seemed troubled. She saw a young man teaching an older woman how to play a game, their laughter genuine and warm. They behave as if they are family, observed. In a sense, they are, Lisa said. Humans form strong emotional bonds very quickly, especially in high-stress situations. We call it unit cohesion, but it goes deeper than military discipline. These soldiers would die for each other, not because they are ordered to, but because they cannot imagine abandoning someone they care about. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. There is an old human saying, "Greater love has no one than this, that someone would lay down their life for their friends." For humans, this is not just philosophy. It is how we are built. We are pack animals. We protect our pack at any cost. Spoke for the first time in hours. What do you consider your pack? Lisa looked at him and something flickered in her eyes. That depends on the human. For some, it is only their immediate family. For others, it extends to their community, their nation, their entire species. She gestured toward the alien delegation. And for some of us, it includes anyone we have chosen to protect, anyone who has become one of us. The implications hung in the air. The conquered had asked humanity for help, and humanity had agreed. In the human mind, that agreement might mean more than a simple military alliance. The conquered species might have become part of humanity's pack, which meant humans would fight for them, as they would fight for their own children. On the final day before arrival Admiral Cole held a briefing for the entire fleet. His face appeared on screens throughout the Endurance, his voice calm and steady. They have brought 40 warships to attack the colony, he said. We have 12 vessels. By any reasonable calculation, we should lose this battle. He paused, letting the numbers sink in. But reasonable calculations do not account for who we are. They do not account for the fact that we have spent 40,000 years preparing for the moment when we would have to defend those who cannot defend themselves. They do not account for the simple truth that humans do not know how to give up. His eyes seemed to look directly at every person watching. The belief that strength is the only thing that matters. Today, we will show them that there is something stronger than strength. There is will. There is the refusal to accept defeat. There is the love we have for those we protect. Cole straightened in his chair. All ships prepare for combat. We drop out of faster than light in 6 hours. Get some rest. Say what needs to be said to those you care about. And then get ready to show the galaxy what humans can do when we take the field. The screens went dark. Throughout the ship, soldiers moved with quiet purpose, checking equipment and making final preparations. Stood at a viewport, watching the strange light of faster-than-light travel swirl outside. Joined her after a moment. I have changed my assessment, the ambassador said. The myths about humans were not exaggerated. If anything, they failed to capture the full truth. What is the full truth? Asked. His compound eyes glittered in the dim light. Humans are not just warriors. They are something far more dangerous. They are believers. They believe in things worth dying for. And a species that knows why it fights is more terrifying than any amount of ships or weapons. Nodded slowly. In a few hours, they would learn this lesson for themselves. She hoped they would survive long enough to remember it. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel on the edge of the system. Immediately, alarms began sounding throughout the Endurance. They had arrived first. Watched the tactical display with growing dread. 40 warships formed a crescent around the inner system, their weapons already firing at the colony's orbital defenses. The defensive stations were crumbling under the assault, their shields flickering and failing one by one. Admiral Cole's voice came through the ship's speakers, calm despite the chaos. All vessels engage at maximum speed. We need to break their formation before they can turn their full attention to us. Fighter squadrons launch immediately. Carrier groups prepare for close-quarters combat. Close-quarters combat. Had read the tactical briefings Lisa had provided. The ships were designed for long-range bombardment, using their superior numbers to overwhelm enemies before they could get close. Humans preferred to fight up close, where their smaller and more maneuverable vessels could exploit gaps in enemy formations. It was a dangerous strategy. Many human ships would not survive the approach. The first human destroyer was destroyed within minutes of engagement. A concentrated barrage from 3 cruisers tore through its shields and ripped the vessel apart. Saw escape pods launching from the wreckage, tiny lights against the darkness of space. A second destroyer fell, then a third. But the remaining human ships did not slow down. They accelerated, pushing their engines beyond safe limits, closing the distance to the fleet with reckless speed. "What are they doing?" demanded. "This is suicide." Lisa stood beside the delegation, her face pale but determined. "They are doing what humans have always done. They are refusing to give up." The human fleet reached the formation and chaos erupted. Instead of trying to match the enemy's long-range firepower, human vessels dove between enemy ships, using their smaller size and superior agility to avoid the worst of the incoming fire. They targeted engines and weapon systems with precision strikes, disabling rather than destroying when possible. The commanders had never faced tactics like this. Their formation began to break apart as individual captains tried to track the swift human vessels that darted through their ranks like angry insects. On the Endurance, the crew worked with desperate efficiency. Watch pilots launch in waves, their small fighters adding to the confusion in the fleet. Damage reports came in constantly, but the humans simply patched what they could and kept fighting. One pilot returned to the carrier with half his fighter's hull missing. His face was bleeding from shrapnel wounds, and his left arm hung limp at his side. The medical team rushed to help him, but he waved them off and climbed into a replacement fighter. He launched again before anyone could stop him. "He should be in the medical bay," said, her voice shaking. Lisa shook her head. "He knows his squadron needs him. The wounds can wait, the battle cannot." The tide began to turn after 3 hours of continuous combat. The human fleet had lost 4 ships, but they had destroyed or disabled 14 vessels. The enemy formation had collapsed into disorganized clusters, each trying to defend itself against the relentless human attacks. But the colony was still in danger. Landing craft had reached the surface during the orbital battle, and ground forces were advancing toward the major population centers. Admiral Cole made a decision. Marine detachment to the surface. Priority is civilian protection. The fleet will continue engaging the remaining enemy vessels. Transport ships detached from the carriers and plunged towards surface. Among them was a vessel carrying Sergeant Danny Park and his squad of 30 Marines. The transport landed near the colony's largest city, a sprawling settlement that held over 200,000 civilians from 6 different conquered species. Forces had already breached the outer defenses and were pushing toward the central district. Danny gathered his squad in the shadow of a damaged building. Smoke rose from fires throughout the city. The sounds of weapons fire echoed from every direction. "Intel says there are about 200 soldiers between us and the main hospital," he said. "The hospital is full of wounded civilians and medical staff who cannot evacuate. We need to hold that building until the orbital battle is won." One of his Marines, a young woman named Karen, checked her weapon. 30 against 200. "Those are not great odds, Sergeant." Danny smiled grimly. "Then we will have to make up for numbers with determination. Standard urban tactics. We move fast, we hit hard, and we do not let them pin us down. Anyone gets separated, make your way to the hospital and join the defense." Questions? There were none. The squad moved out. The next 18 hours were the longest of his life. She watched the battle unfold through communication feeds and tactical updates, unable to do anything but observe as humans and fought for control of the city. Danny's squad engaged the enemy in the streets, using buildings and rubble for cover. They could not match the in direct combat. The reptilian soldiers were larger, stronger, and protected by heavy armor that shrugged off most infantry weapons. But the humans did not fight directly. They set traps and ambushes. They attacked from unexpected angles and retreated before they could respond. They used explosives to collapse buildings on enemy positions. They fought with a creativity and viciousness that they had never encountered. When Danny took a plasma bolt to his left shoulder, watched him cauterize the wound with a heated blade from his survival kit. He screamed once, then clenched his jaw and kept fighting with his remaining arm. "How is he still moving?" whispered. Lisa's voice was hoarse from hours of tension. "Because people are depending on him. Because he made a promise to protect them. Because he is human, and humans do not stop until the mission is complete or they are dead." The squad reached the hospital after 9 hours of running battles. They found the building surrounded by troops preparing for a final assault. Inside were 3,000 civilians, including hundreds of children from the colony schools. Danny looked at his remaining Marines. 12 had been killed in the fighting. 8 more were wounded badly enough that they could barely stand. That left 10 effective soldiers against nearly 100. "We hold the doors," he said. "We do not let a single one of them inside, not one." They took positions at every entrance. They attacked in waves, confident that numbers would overwhelm the tiny human force. They were wrong. For 9 more hours, Danny's squad held the hospital. They fought until their weapons overheated and they had to scavenge from the dead. They fought through wounds that should have been fatal. They fought with knives and fists when ammunition ran out. Karen took a blade through her stomach defending a side entrance. She killed the who stabbed her, then killed 2 more before she collapsed. The medics inside the hospital pulled her through the door and began emergency surgery while the battle raged outside. When the sun rose on the second day, the ground forces received new orders. The orbital battle was lost. Their fleet had been shattered. 23 of their 40 ships were destroyed or disabled, and the survivors were retreating from the system. The soldiers on the ground looked at the hospital they had failed to capture. They looked at the handful of wounded humans still standing in the doorways, still holding weapons, still refusing to die. Then Danny Park sat down heavily against a wall as the last transport disappeared into the sky. His shoulder was a mess of burned flesh and bandages. He had not slept in over 40 hours. 3 of his friends were dead, and 4 more might not survive their wounds. But the hospital was safe. 3,000 civilians, including all those children, were alive because 30 humans had decided that their lives mattered more than their own. Watch the aftermath through a drone feed. Human medics poured out of the hospital to treat the wounded Marines. Civilians emerged cautiously, staring at the small group of aliens who had saved them. A child approached Danny and said something the audio could not capture. Danny smiled, despite his exhaustion and pain, and patted the child gently on the head. Stood beside watching the same feed. His clicking sounds had returned, but they were softer now, almost reverent. "I understand now why the galaxy forgot them," he said. "It was not because they were too weak to remember. It was because they were too terrifying to believe." Nodded slowly. "And now the galaxy will remember. Now everyone will know what happens when humans take the field." In orbit, the Endurance held a memorial service for the 412 humans who had died in the battle. Their names were read aloud, one by one, while the survivors stood in silence. Then they began preparing for the next battle. They had more ships, more soldiers, more territory. The war was not over. But for the first time in centuries, the conquered had hope, because they had humans fighting beside them. And humans did not know how to give up. 6 months had passed since the Battle of. In that time, the galaxy had changed more than it had in the previous 10,000 cycles. Human fleets worked alongside conquered forces to push them back system by system. The reptilian empire that had seemed unstoppable was now crumbling, their armies demoralized, and their commanders unable to adapt to an enemy that simply refused to behave the way enemies were supposed to behave. They had expected to face the same timid resistance they had encountered from every other species. Instead, they faced humans. They faced soldiers who kept fighting after wounds that should have killed them. They faced pilots who rammed their damaged ships into enemy vessels rather than retreat. They faced Marines who charged into overwhelming odds with nothing but determination and the absolute belief that they would find a way to win. Had documented everything. She had filled hundreds of reports with observations about human physiology, psychology, and military tactics, but nothing she wrote could fully capture what she had witnessed. The truth was too large for words. Now she stood in the Galactic Assembly Hall once again, watching Admiral Cole address the gathered representatives. The war was effectively over. The Dominion's military was shattered and human ships orbited there. The question now was what to do with them. "The conquered has suffered greatly at hands," Cole said, his voice carrying through the vast chamber. 9 million civilians died in their initial attacks. Millions more were killed before we could drive them back. There are those who would say they deserve to be destroyed in turn. An eye for an eye, as my people once believed. He paused, looking around the room at the representatives of a dozen species. Some nodded in agreement. The desire for revenge was strong among those who had lost so much. "But humanity has walked that path before," Cole continued. We spent thousands of years believing that the answer to violence was more violence. We nearly destroyed ourselves with that belief. We learned, eventually, that vengeance does not bring peace. It only ensures that the next generation will have someone to take vengeance upon them. He touched a panel, and a document appeared on the displays throughout the chamber. This is humanity's proposed terms for surrender. They will disarm completely. They will pay reparations to every species they harmed. They will accept conquered law and conquered oversight of their government for the next 50 cycles. But they will not be exterminated. Their civilians will not be harmed. Their children will grow up in a galaxy that offers them a chance to be better than their parents were. Ambassador of the rose from his seat. His species had lost an entire colony to and his voice trembled with barely controlled anger. You would show mercy to these monsters, after everything they have done. Cole met his gaze steadily. Yes, because mercy is what separates civilization from barbarism, because punishing the guilty while protecting the innocent is the only path that does not lead to endless cycles of revenge, and because humanity did not enter this war to become the thing we were fighting against. The debate continued for hours. Many species wanted harsher terms. Some wanted the reduced to a primitive state, stripped of technology and confined to a single planet. A few openly called for genocide. But in the end, the assembly voted to accept the human proposal. The margin was narrow, but it was enough. The Dominion would end, but their species would survive. After the vote, found Lisa standing alone on a balcony, overlooking the great city that surrounded the assembly hall. The human commander looked tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. Your people fought a war and then argued for mercy, said, joining her at the railing. I'm not sure the conquered would have done the same. Lisa shrugged. The conquered has not made the mistakes we have. They have not seen where the path of endless revenge leads. We have had civil wars that killed hundreds of millions. We have built weapons that could have ended all life on our planet. We learned, very slowly and very painfully, that there has to be another way. She looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. When we watched the galaxy from afar, we saw species repeating the patterns we recognized from our own history. Conquest and revenge, empires rising and falling, the same cycles over and over again. We decided to wait until we had something different to offer. What do you offer? Asked. Lisa smiled slightly. Hope, maybe. The belief that things can be better, the willingness to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves and then to show mercy to those we defeat. I do not know if it will work. Humans are still learning how to be the species we want to be, but we thought it was worth trying. Considered this for a long moment. Then she asked the question that had been on her mind since the delegation first arrived on Earth. Why did you agree to help us? You had been hidden for 40,000 cycles. You could have stayed hidden. They would never have found you. Lisa's smile faded. Because someone needed help and we could provide it. Because 9 million people were dead and more would die if someone did not act. Because that is who we are. We cannot watch suffering and do nothing. It is not in our nature. She turned to face directly. The legends your ancestors recorded were true. We are persistent predators who hunt by refusing to give up. We are pack animals who will die for those we consider our own. And when your delegation came to us asking for help, you became our pack. All of you, every species in the conquered. We will protect you as we protect each other for as long as we are able. Felt tears forming in her ancient eyes, her bioluminescent skin flickering with emotion. The galaxy does not deserve such loyalty from a species it forgot. The galaxy did not forget us, Lisa said gently. It simply stopped believing we were real. Now it knows otherwise, and nothing will ever be the same. The formal ceremony admitting humanity to the Galactic Conquered took place the following week. Admiral Cole signed the treaties on behalf of Earth, promising cooperation and mutual defense with all member species. In exchange, humanity gained full membership and equal standing in galactic affairs. But the ceremony was not the moment remembered most clearly. That came afterward, on the planet Prime, in a public park near the Assembly Hall. She had gone for a walk to clear her thoughts after the long day of speeches and celebrations. She found Sergeant Danny parked there, his shoulders still from the battle of. He was surrounded by a group of young children, teaching them some kind of human game that involved throwing an orange ball through a raised hoop. The children were terrible at it. Their thin limbs were not designed for throwing, and the ball went everywhere except through the hoop. But Danny did not seem to care. He cheered every attempt, offered encouragement after every failure, and celebrated wildly when one child finally managed to get the ball through the target. Watched this scene for a long time. A human soldier who had fought through hell to protect civilians he had never met was now spending his free time teaching alien children how to play basketball. This, she realized, was the truth about humans that no legend could capture. They were warriors, yes. They were terrifying in battle, unstoppable in pursuit of their goals, capable of enduring pain and loss that would break any other species. But underneath all of that, they were beings who wanted to connect, to share, to make others happy. They had hidden from the galaxy for 40,000 cycles, but not because they were afraid. They had been waiting until they were ready to be the kind of species the galaxy needed. Protectors rather than conquerors, builders rather than destroyers, friends rather than masters. The galaxy had called them a myth because the truth was too extraordinary to believe. Now the myth was reality, and everything had changed. Walked over to where Danny was teaching. He looked up and smiled, recognizing her from the endurance. "Elder Counselor," he said, "would you like to try?" She looked at the orange ball, at the hoop that seemed impossibly high, at the children watching with curious eyes. "Yes," she said, "I believe I would." Danny handed her the ball and began explaining how to throw it. His voice was patient and kind, the voice of someone who genuinely enjoyed helping others learn. An ancient keeper of records and witness to the most important events in galactic history, missed her first 17 shots before finally getting the ball through the hoop. Danny cheered as if she had won a war. Maybe in a way she had.